Let this be a message to anybody that isn't listening to an album that has either crossed your path, been recommended to you, or just kind of like made their presence known, and not listen to it just based on the cover art of the album, because that's what I did. And when I finally sat down and listened to it, I was still kicking myself that I didn't listen to this sooner. So let's dive in. Red Alert in the Blue Forest by the Von Hertzen brothers. So, the Von Hertzen brothers are a trio, kind of hailing from Finland, and they're one of the kind of like crossover prog works, definitely utilizing progressive rock tendencies, but wouldn't, be hard and fast a progressive rock band. I'm getting flavors of so many different types of bands and movements in this work, and they have a pretty lengthy history. This one is their 8th studio album after their first one of Experience back in 2001. And unfortunately, this is the first album from them that I've listened to. I haven't heard any of their other albums, but that is going to change. So as I mentioned, this is their 8th studio album with the 3 brothers of Mikko, Kyle, and Joni, I think. And then rounding off this band, we have Robert Engstrand on keyboards and Sammy Kupamäki on drums, and I am so sorry about my pronunciation of all of those. So yeah, we've got the 3 brothers, and holy jeez, man, I've been loving this. The main feeling, the main flavor of music that I'm getting with this is very similar to like a motorcycle, where it's like very eclectic. There's a lot of different sounds and soundscapes going on, with the predominant style of music being that kind of post-grunge rock that we had in the late 90s, early 2000s, but recontextualized and remodernized into the current standing of what we have here, with lots of different influences from like the 70s in terms of like the acid rock and the space rock that would be led by bands like Pink Floyd or Black Sabbath, while still having like a lot of experimentations that, like, say, Mike Oldfield would be playing with Partridge Ridge, Return to Omadon, and Tubular Bells. And a lot of that can definitely be found on this album and their presentation here. The thing that I love about this album and about a lot of these songs are those tracks that are a little bit on the longer side, specifically Blue Forest, Peace Patrol, Northern Lights, and Anil. All of these tracks have this brilliant and beautiful play out that grows and builds, and where all other bands would have like stopped or at least moved on to somewhere else, the brothers decided to continue on and really explore and like extrapolate the music that's going on here. Like, they are definitely excavating the landscape for the real gems, and each passage is built upon the next and built upon the next, and they use the crescendos to elevate the music forward. And even with these longer stretches of music, you then have smaller tracks, such as The Day of Reckoning, All of a Sudden You're Gone, and Pirates of the Razoborgen, again, apologies about the pronunciations on there, that are very energetic, very bombastic. Like, the energy and the momentum that they cast just leads the song so forward that you have to hold on to for fear of getting lost in this momentum. It's so energetic. It's almost like watching Sonic the Hedgehog just blast through like Emerald City, like it's just so fast-paced and so luscious in that sense. I'm going to keep gushing about this album because there's so much to gush about, but one of the things that I really do love about this album is the way that it is structured and how each song follows the next. Like Day of Reckoning blooms right into Blue Forest without missing a single beat. And, Day of Reckoning is that really bombastic, very energetic, very lively rock track that comes into Blue Forest that is this very synth-led, very like Mike Oldfield wandering of the landscape, very big, very lush, and it keeps growing, and the two play very, very well with one another. And I'm almost getting like feelings of how like Steven Wilson would construct an album and how he would like really play out and structure specific tracks. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about Peace Patrol. But even still, like if you had taken some of the more darker aspects of Steven's works from, say, like Grace for Drowning with some more of the experimental parts from like The Sky Moves Sideways, and then expressed it in a way that Mike Oldfield would, you basically get the third track of Promise, in that it's very dark, very guttural, but it always has this like very whimsical, very English countryside aspect to it that the Promise has. Now, All of a Sudden You're Gone is kind of the big leading track off of this, like it's the big single, and it's fine, but I do feel as though it might be one of the more valleys of all these massive hills. I enjoy it, and I love the big build that we have, the big play out at the end of this track. I like how it starts off much more somber than some of the other tracks that we've had so far, and then it really builds itself and really crescendos into this really big and starstruck moment. And then we come into Peace Patrol, and holy geez, this is the longest track at exactly 10 minutes. But what I love is that the first half of this track, it mirrors the same kind of energy that we would feel from Day of Reckoning in being very driven, very powerful. It's like you're traveling at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But then it slows itself down at the midpoint, and it's reminding me of like the Steven Wilson track of Home Invasion and Regret Number 9 from Hand Cannot Erase. You have this really amazing play out that is a 1-2 punch, but this time instead of it being the keyboards and the guitar, it's the saxophone and the guitar. And man, I love how the saxophone builds itself up to this brilliant plateau that the guitar is then able to grab onto and take even further. Again, it's mirroring kind of what was going on with Regret Number 9. Love that play out and that build up. Holy geez. And then from that big essence, we come into the very Joel Fuel, very powerful and very happy, almost whimsical track of the Pirates of Rosenbergen. Really, really fun. But then we probably come into my favorite track. And so as I'm talking about the structure on here, I'm loving how it's, you know, really big track followed up by a couple smaller tracks, followed up by a big track, followed up by, you know, a couple smaller ones. And here, even though Peace Patrol is just 2 tracks away, Pirates of Rosenberg provided the fun, whimsical aspect for when we get to Anil. And Anil's probably my favorite track on here. Like, it's definitely giving me that flavors of some of the best parts of, like, Omadon or Return to Omadon from Mike Oldfield being this really big and luscious. Like, it's reminding me of Through Shaded Woods from Lunatic Soul. Love how luscious and dark and vibrant this track is, even though it's not necessarily blowing down the doors. And at just under 7 minutes, it is providing a very self-contained prog epic within a shorter period of time. Like, it's very heavenly. It's very, very like angelic in that approach. I can't help but just get moved away when I'm hearing this. Like, this is definitely one of those closing my eyes, letting the heavens open up and just letting it all soak in. And unlike tracks like Day of Reckoning and the beginning of Peace Patrol, it's not relying on their ability to create extremely energetic and fast-paced music. They're using that technique in the background rhythm section to allow this very heavenly harmonizations within the vocal works, because that is the star performer on here. Then we come into Elbow, which again is kind of like a little bit of a come down. It's kind of reminding me of The Promise and the beginning of Peace Patrol. It's not quite as driven, it's not quite as energetic, but it has this really deep, menacing flavor to it. Really enjoy that one. And then we come into the last big track, the last really meaty and juicy one of Northern Lights at about 7.5 minutes. And it kind of does what the second half of Peace Patrol and the majority of Anil does by really building this orchestration of rhythm styles blended with the harmonies that orchestrate this brilliantness. Like, it's reminding me of some of the masterfulness that like Anthony Phillips would do within his more intimate style of rhythm guitar playing. Like, I'm getting a lot of that like White Mountain or Visions of Angels within Trespass from Genesis, but also some of his stuff from like Geese and the Goose, especially from, not Geese and the Goose, Goose and the Ghost or Ghost and the Geese, his first solo record, in the last 2 tracks of that. Yeah, I just love how driven this one is. I I love how it's like almost a great summary of the album overall. The last two tracks, though, of I'm going to try this, oh boy, Southern Scar and Disappear There. They're fine, and they do a very good job of closing off the album. Like, it just kind of tucks everything away in a very beautiful bow that I really kind of enjoy, but I do find that, like, these last two tracks aren't necessarily the best that the band has to offer within this. They are just kind of like a come down, especially after how big and grand Northern Lights was. And it just kind of like sets the album down very gently and just kind of like tucks them into bed. So yeah, oh boy, in the end, Red Alert in the Blue Forest was an absolute treat that really blindsided me. Like Nathan on Shuffle recommended this to me a while ago on one of his album roundups, where he would kind of talk about some of the albums that were pretty prominent, and I made a note to myself to check it out, but I just never really found the time or the energy to, you know, give it a spin. But man, am I ever kicking myself now. Like, this is by far one of my favorite albums of this year. Like, I honestly can't think of another album that has wowed me to the extent that this album has. This is one that I will be hard pressed to find a better album from this year. And it might just be because I came in with very, like, no expectations about. It might be that I was just like, oh, okay, I'll give it a try, I'll see what it is. And then having everything exceed all of the expectations. I don't know, but man, I've just been digging this. I've been listening to this for well over a week and a half, and I still can't stop listening to it. Each time I listen to it, I get more and more out of it. You know, I haven't diminished the returns yet. So, yeah, holy geez, this is a fantastic album, a masterclass. It gets the note seal of approval, the thumbs up from me. I think it's an absolute banger. Again, walk, don't run, all of those fun things that I like to say about these kinds of albums. And yeah, I think I'm ready to rate this one. So I will say that Red Alert in the Blue Forest by the Von Hertzen brothers is one that I absolutely love with my whole heart. So, yeah, that's what I've got for Red Alert in the Blue Forest. What do you guys think about this album? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. Don't be like me and sit on this album. Go and listen to it immediately. I think this is one of those few albums where, regardless of your musical taste, you're going to find some kind of enjoyment out of it. And I definitely found that. Yeah, if you like this, give this a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe and ring that bell so that you don't get, you know, left behind or miss any of my videos. And I think that's all I've got for you guys today. That's all I've got. So, thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.